This is the second video I started the same way. What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're going to be talking about how to wall in Revit. It seems like a fairly mundane and fairly simple thing, and for the most time it is. But if you work on big projects, especially somewhere where you need to standardize things, or somewhere where you have a lot of repetition, I promise you, especially the second part of this tutorial would be very useful to you. We'll start with the absolute basics when it comes to walls in Revit, and I promise you it will become complex very, very quickly. I don't mean complicated, because I would argue nothing in Revit is complicated, but complex. Some of the things I'm going to cover today are the following. I have my little trusty lovely list here. We're going to talk about the compositions of a wall. We're going to talk about all the layers that go inside that would make the wall. There's a few things to keep in mind in there if you especially want to move into the 4D component of Revit, which is the extraction of information or the extraction of data and quantifying things. So this is very important. We would talk about location line and why this is important, especially when you draw big projects and you anticipate certain changes to come along onto specific walls. You want to make sure that you do it in such a way that it doesn't mess up your geometry or most of the parameters you've set up. Another thing, we're going to talk about modify extents. This is absolutely great when you talk about cantilevers and ceiling connections, so that without using 2D, you have almost perfect joints. So that's a good one. We're going to talk about wrapping. It can be extremely useful at inserts when you have windows or doors going inside of a door, especially if you're interested in photorealistic renderings, because you want to make sure that some materials wrap around your openings and you don't see the default material where you've cut your geometry. So this will be something I will cover today with you. Reveals and sweeps. This is a big one. I've seen different companies use them in different ways, but we're going to keep it extremely basic here and just enough so that you have the knowledge of how to create your own ones, how to add them as a complement to your walls, or how to build them inside your walls, such things as baseboards or cornices. So that's also coming up. And at the end, my absolute favorite part is how to make parts. If you've ever been in a situation where you look at a facade and you wonder, how do I divide this aluminum facade into different panels that have different materials with different colors without splitting surfaces and just painting on top? Because this messes up very easily. I got you. There's a beautiful way in which we can do it in Revit. So I'll just kind of stop talking. You would be able to see all the timestamps right here, right now. And let's start into it. All right, so I have a project open. I'm running Revit 23. Yeah, I'm running Revit 2023 because obviously that's, is the latest version. So I've opened a metric project, just a metric, simple architectural project. And when you want to create a wall, probably one of the best ways to do it is in plan, but you can also do it in 3D. That's perfectly fine. For those of you who are absolute noobs, hi. WA is the command. This is the shortcut. So if I hit WA, this would create a wall for me. WA for wall. Kind of a lot of the shortcuts in Revit you would notice over time have to do with either the first two letters of whatever it is that you are creating, or the first and the last one, or something somewhere around the first one and the last one. Doesn't matter. I'm talking too much again. So you would see that once you're creating this wall, I'm kind of moving my mouse here, and at the top right, or what we call the properties bar, you would have this drop-down menu, okay? And in this drop-down menu, Revit by default, or maybe your company already has a standard with preferred walls, interior and exterior, comes with a list of pre-built walls for you, okay? So if I select this first one, and if I just kind of draw it here. What? Oh, I'm on a structural plan. Fantastic. All right, I opened the structural model, not an architectural one. All right, metric architectural template. Let's do this. Much better. All right. All right. So WA to enable the wall, the same thing. You have a bunch of walls that are already there predetermined for you. So exterior brick on metal studs in this particular case looks very nice to me. If I zoom in, you will see that I don't see any of the layers of the wall. And the reason is because this particular view, the level of detail is set to coarse. I will just put it into fine, and you would be able to see all the layers in the wall. If you want to see some of the line thicknesses, TL is the shortcut you're looking for. So TL on my keyboard gives me this. In general, I don't like working in a scale 1 to 100. I would go to 1 to 50. It alleviates a little bit of that line weight thing. But line weights are something to talk about in a completely different chapter. So I have my wall here. I can select it. I have two grips, one at the top, one at the bottom. I can select it and kind of move the wall wherever I want. If I want to lock it in particular direction, you will see that Revit by default snaps to 90 degrees. So if I want to snap here, maybe 45 as well. Yeah, 45 as well, and then 0, of course. But if I have some weird angle and if I grab it and I hold shift while dragging it, you'll see that it would do it along the initial plane of the wall. So this is kind of useful. Another thing, when you're drawing a wall, I would like you to pay attention to several things. So I'll hit WA again to put me into the command. And usually in Revit, when you create anything, whatever it is, from a wall to a complex 3D element, in the middle of the creation of that component, you have this, the ribbon here at the top, the modify panel usually lights up in green. And this is completely normal. This is actually what we're hoping for. And depending on the element you're creating here at the bottom, it would give you some additional information, which would help you create a better element as you go, okay? So there will be things like your location line. We're going to talk about it in a second. If you want to chain it, and I'll just show you what this is right now. So I can click start point, end point, and you see how it chains the whole thing. So it's one continuous loop. If I hit my WA again to create my wall and turn off chain, it would just do one at a time. That's perfectly fine. Select them and delete them. There's too much stuff happening. So WA again to open up my wall. And you will see that very similarly to when you draft lines in Revit, you have access to the same type of kind of geometry creation. So if I need a rectangle, I can just hit the rectangle up here and create a rectangle this way. If for whatever reason, so WA, click the rectangle, my wall seems to be kind of going in the opposite direction of what I wanted it to be. Let's say I wanted the brick to go inside for whatever reason. Great way to do this very, very quickly is to select one or all of the walls that you want to select and hit spacebar. This is almost another truism in Revit, is that anytime you want to flip something, and this is almost every time, so not all the time, you hit space and it would reverse it. Sometimes it would flip it actually in 4 different directions, depending on how this particular element is created. For walls, it just flips it in and out. That's all you need to know. Okay, so WA, fantastic. One thing you'd appreciate coming from AutoCAD, let's say, or from Rhino, is that you actually don't have to hit enter after every command. So WA is just enough. You don't have to do WA enter, WA space. You're good to go. You can do circles if this is your thing. Of course, whoever's building this is going to hate you, but hey, we're designers. We're like experimenting with stuff. The other thing when you create the wall, and I'm just going to go in 3D at the same time. So I'll hit this little house icon here. And I'll do WT, which would split my view. If I had 5 views open or 5 little tabs here at the top, it would split it in such a way that so I can see all of them. And what you can see, and again, this is the default Revit setting. Of course, your company, if it has a standard, it would look maybe a little bit different. You'll see that I already have 2 levels, level 1 and level 2, okay? And level 2 has a particular height. Now, if I look, it seems that my walls, by default, as they were created, seems to surpass it. So one thing I can do is I can select all my walls and actually look at the properties here. So I have things like base constraint. And if I put myself to be perfectly aligned, you will see that the base constraint, in this case being level 1, corresponds to this level 1. So perfect, we start exactly where we want. But then the top constraint, or the top of the wall, is not constrained to anything. That's why it's called unconstrained. And it just has an arbitrary length or height of 8 meters. Now, to us, this is okay, but if we have a project in which, I want to say that my exterior walls go from certain level to another certain level, I can actually maybe want to constrain that to something. So I would say a top constraint, put it at level 2, boom, good to go. Does that mean that I cannot surpass it? Absolutely not. One of the things I can do right away is do top offset. So let's say if I just give it 1000 or 1 meter. So in Revit, if you're a newbie, hi, you can just type 1M. And hit enter. So this would automatically assume that it's not assume, but set 1000 millimeters. And you would see that here I would have exactly 1 meter of what? Because I'm in 3D, obviously, never mind. But it surpasses it here by a meter. If I select my walls again, you will see that there's this thing called base offset. So it's very similar. What's exactly the same thing as the top constraint. If I do 1000, you'll see it's going to lift it up. If I do negative 1000, it will bring it down. The beauty of this is, and again, welcome to parametric design. If this is one of your first exposures, of course, is that if I take that level and if I move it up, regardless of how much, this top offset of 1000 1000 millimeters would always be true. So this is great. Control Z just to go back. These settings that we're looking here at inside the properties are actually available to you within the creation of a wall. So if I do WA again, and if I look here at my ribbon, I can already say, hey man, I want this to be a height. I want it to be up to level 2, and I want to chain it because I'm going to be creating several of them. My location line coming in a second. And if I have any particular offsets or radius. Radius is a funny one because I can create a corner and it would round it for me in this way. So if this is your cup of tea, you can do it right away while you are drawing, okay? So let's talk about the composition of the wall, actually what goes into a wall.